So we are back after a few days away. We've got plenty to talk about. We've got some of the best pollsters putting out their polls. We've got some of the worst pollsters putting out their polls. We can react to it or we can have a great time. And we're going to be looking at the RCP averages, the RCP new polls. We're going to be looking at everything. We're going to go state by state. So we're going to start on the Pacific like we always do. Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii. They're all going blue. There's no question. We don't even need to talk about it really. Any of the four are going to go red. It's going to be Oregon. It's not going to go red. It's probably not going to be under 10 points. It's probably around 12 right now. Washington's in the 20s or 30s. California's in the 20s or 30s. Hawaii's, around 20. There's no point talking about it. It's a done deal. Now we can move to the mountain states. Idaho is going to stay red. No third party, no major third party influence this time with Kennedy suppressing his own campaign. So Utah's going to go red. I mean, there was no doubt anyway, but it's just even more secure. Montana, despite the close Senate race there, it's still a Republican state at the presidential level. It's going to stay red. Wyoming, probably the most Republican state with Tennessee, it's going to stay red. North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska's third, first at large district. Kansas is going to stay red by over 10 points. Oklahoma, over 10 points. Texas, probably, well, definitely under 10, but probably over 5. I have it around 6 right now. And Alaska is going to be likely Republican. It was 10 points last time. I think it's going to shift left, but I think it's going to stay in the Republican column. There's no question about that. It's just by how much. I think it will be roughly 8 points. Now, Colorado, I'd probably have it at about 10 points right now. You could put it as a likely, you could put it as a safe. I'm going to put it as safe. New Mexico, we had a fresh poll come out recently from New Mexico. It had, if we can find it in here, it may be on the second page. It had Harris up by 6. That would be, and it's the first one on the next page. It was a Rasmussen one, but Harris is up by 6. You say Rasmussen maybe right leaning mostly, even though they can be quite impartial. But even still, it's probably 8 points maybe. But I'd probably have it at about 8, maybe 7.5. But again, not really in play, and it doesn't really change a whole lot on its own. I mean, maybe you pair it with Nevada, it could change things, but at the moment, it's not really worth talking about. We have Nebraska's second district, so this is another interesting one. We've had some recent polls out of here. We've had the one in August, which had this is actually for the House, so we don't need to look at this one. Here we go. Trump versus Harris. We had a Harris plus 11 and now Harris plus 9. So again, I had it as likely. It's probably going to be likely. I mean, the average of that is 10. I think it's probably 8. You look at CNN, they're obviously going to be to the left. New York Times, CNN are also to the left, even though we saw some right, or not right, but right of the average polls from them recently. So probably around between 7 to 9 points, probably. But again, it's not really in play. It would be probably put in a group with Maine and New Hampshire and Virginia as ones that Republicans, if the Harris campaign were to explode, they would go after these states. But right now they don't need to because they're just not even worth talking about. We have Minnesota next, which is conveniently right there. MinPost has it at +5. This was at the start of September. Then we had a +5, a +6, a +3. So the average actually has it below 5. I think it's above 5 still. I'd probably say it's if I could envision a number right now, I'd probably say 5.3. Which I thought I might have just got off there, but I didn't. It could be anywhere between 5 and 8, probably 7. I think it's going to move right compared to 2020 because obviously black vote share is big in Minnesota and you're going to have way less black turnout, even though it's Harris and she's a black woman. Black men are not interested in voting for her, although they are only a third of the black electorate. But overall, I don't think she's going to turn out enough black people to really take the big margin that Biden took in 2020, which was 7.1%, I think. So it'll probably be to the right of that, but maybe not by so much, maybe 5 to 6 points. Iowa, This is one that I've had safe Republican the whole time. I think it was 6, 7, 8 points last time in 2020, and it's been moving right since Obama. But we will move it to likely because, and I've really tried to fight the polls on this one, but Iowa, well, the poll hasn't come out of Iowa for a little while now, so we could be looking for a bit here. But Iowa, we had the gold standard poll from Iowa, and it's not on here, that had Iowa at, maybe we'll be in state polls, but it had Iowa at 4 or so points. Um, so I don't think it's that close, but I think it may be under 10 actually. Probably again around 9, 8 points, but it's still not in play. Mizzou. This is one that I think could be a bit of a Virginia 2020, that it's, 10.1 points, or Alaska 2020 where it's 10.0, where it's in the likely column, but it's barely there and people are sleeping on it. But I think Missouri will stay red. I mean, we've had, polls at 10, 9, 11, numbers around there from Missouri. I I think at the end of the day it'll probably be about, because again polls tend to lean left overall, so I think it will probably be around 10 to 14. That's a big margin actually. I'd probably say 12 to 14, but just want to keep an eye on. Same with Louisiana, maybe in 2028 that one could move over. If it keeps trending the way it is, it could go blue. Maybe not that soon, but we could start to see it maybe in play a little bit more. Arkansas is going to stay red. Tennessee, as we mentioned earlier, one of the reddest states in the country. Kentucky, West Virginia, Ohio, and Indiana. Ohio, is it under 10? Probably. I mean, the averages in the polls have it at about 8 or 9. I don't think again, the polls tend to lean left. That's kind of a generalization of the polls, but they just do overall. Maybe Ohio. I mean, Ohio's pretty much in the same boat as Iowa. They're going to kind of copy each other. They have done for a little while now. Obviously, Obama took Ohio and Iowa, and then they both went red in 2016 and 2020, and they are going to in 2024. It's just by how much. I think Ohio maybe will be. I mean, it's sandwiched in between swing states, so maybe there will be some more Democrat influence, but then it's surrounded by red states to the south. I mean, again, your surrounding states, it doesn't really. I mean, look at Nebraska's second district. Obviously, well, that's kind of different because it's a district, but Colorado, it's a blue state amongst red states in, every way you look, including the South. Oklahoma borders it. But anyway, I think Ohio will be under 10 points now, same as Iowa, but I don't think that's a reflection of the rest of the country. I just think I wasn't paying attention to those ones, to be honest, before because they just weren't in play, but they're worth looking at, and I do think maybe Ohio's, if I was to make a guess now, it's probably between 9 and 11. So you'd be well within your rights to put that as safe Republican. Illinois is a safe blue. There's no question about that. I mean, Illinois is another one surrounded by red states, and it's safe blue. It makes no sense. So you can't really look at neighboring states and draw any conclusions from it. Maine. So the first district is obviously going to go blue. The second district, at large rather, is going to go blue. Likely, maybe lean. It all depends on this second district. I think I had it at lean last time, and then I think we've had a recent poll out of Maine. I'm so sure, but it had Republicans up a little bit more than expected. I don't think it will be on RCP anymore because it was quite a few days ago now. But as we check, it's not, so that's a shame. But Maine overall, I think, is going to go blue by probably 8 to 6 points. Again, same boat as Virginia, same boat as Minnesota, same boat as New Hampshire. Again, New Hampshire probably going to go blue. Vermont, one of the bluest states. Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, DC, Rhode, and Massachusetts. We had a Delaware poll the other day that had plus 20, but that might have been for the Senate race, actually. It was for Blunt Rochester. So, and for the governorship as well. So, Democrats leading all down ballot races by some margin in Delaware. So, I mean, it's not always a perfect reflection of how the state's going to vote at the presidential level, but it's a pretty good indicator. Mississippi is going to go red. Alabama's going to go red. Florida's going to go red by a lead margin. South Carolina's going to go deep red. New York's going to go deep blue. And we are down to our swing states as soon as we turn Virginia blue. Virginia's an interesting one. Again, we've had a lot more polls out of there than we've tended to recently. Here we have a New York poll, by the way, plus 14 for Harris. That's whatever. Virginia, it's getting polled quite a lot now. I think, to be honest, and again, I've got no horse in the race, so I have to keep reiterating this, but it seems like Democrat pollsters went to Virginia to kind of have a win, and it's backfired a little bit because you look at New York Times, Siena had it at only +5, Roanoke College had it at only 3, Washington Post had it at 8, University, again, universities and colleges tend to lean left. They had it at 2. I don't think it's that close, but even the university having it that close is insane. And The Hill and Emerson had it at 8. That's probably more realistic. I mean, I have it at about 5 to 4 right now. Rasmussen had it at 3. And again, Rasmussen were actually, even though they're right leaning, they underestimated Trump in 2020. So they actually overestimated Biden by, I think it was 0.2 overall. So, and again, it was kind of a unusual political environment. Trump was still, people didn't really know what to make of him in the polls because in 2016 he defied all polls. But then in 2020, I think people thought it was just a Clinton factor, and again, the same thing happened, but there were outstanding circumstances each time. Trump came out of nowhere in 2016, and then in 2020, I mean, the whole narrative around him was so bad that, and you see it in the UK actually with conservatives, going out and saying you support Trump is frowned upon in society in general. And it was the same for Trump supporters in 2020. You couldn't go out and say, oh, I'm a Trump supporter. So, especially in 2016 as well, that's why you kind of blindsided people. And now I think it's more socially acceptable. I think the country's just so divided that people don't care what the other side thinks of them. So maybe the polling bias won't be so egregious, but in Wisconsin it was 6 to 7 points. Even if you bring that down to 2, Trump leads in the state. And then, well, we'll get to it, but then things are not looking so good for Harris. So anyway, that's Virginia. Just wanted to do a quick update on Virginia. Now, we can go to the recent polls. We have North Carolina, where we'll start, because again, this was supposed to be the most Republican state of the 7. It's kind of not anymore. A lot of people attribute that to Mark Robinson. I don't think that's the case, because I think most voters don't care about that when you're talking about Trump. You're talking about reverse coattails, as Rep puts it. But we look here. Trump's up by 2. We have a tie in CNN. That probably means Trump's up. Atlas was so strange the other day, and I don't actually want to go on their website, but Atlas was so unusual. They were all over the place. We'll get to them. I don't want to go to them all through all their polls just yet, but they something else. They were actually the most accurate pollster in 2020. I don't think they're going to be this time. I mean, that may just be, we got blindsided by them in 2020. So maybe the same is happening again. Fox's polling firms are actually more liberal than you'd think, and they still have Trump up. Bloomberg, we don't even need to talk about them. They are all over the place. We just ignore them completely. They have it +2 for Harris. That's going to change the average. But the actual reputable pollsters, the only one that has Harris up is Emerson, and that was from 2 weeks ago. So things still aren't looking very good in North Carolina for the Democrats overall. New York Times had Trump up. Rasmussen had Trump up by 3, which again, right leaning, but Marist had it at a tie, and that's definitely a liberal pollster. I'm probably going to say, I mean, the RCP average is 0.6. When you equate in that Bloomberg are horrific, and I just talked about these polls, but these are, 2 weeks old here. You probably say Trump's up by a tilt. I wouldn't call it a lean. I think it is still a tilt. So that would be under 1 point. I think it's probably around 0.9, because you got this Trump +4 that will fall out of the average soon. So, I mean, it's bordering on lean, there's no question, but it's, again, and we look at polling on this day in history. Again, North Carolina, Trump tends to get underestimated. We saw it in 2016 with Hillary. We saw it in 2020, just like the rest of the country, to be fair, but we saw it in 2020 against Biden, although he was actually up against Hillary at this point. But he won it by a way bigger margin than 0.3. Uh, but that's North Carolina. I still say it's a tilt, but you could definitely make a case it's a lean for Republicans. Pennsylvania, and this just paints the whole story. Such a frustrating state because every poll is a tie. But we have this UMass Lowell poll, which is going to drop out soon. That is going to mean that Harris has won one out of the last however many polls. This is what, 10, roughly 10 polls. That's really bad. And the only poll that she is winning is Bloomberg. This is the most important state. Bloomberg, by the way, again, awful. This is the most important state. This is 19 electoral votes we're talking about. And she's really struggling. And you look at, okay, Trafalgar, right-leaning. Atlas is all over the place. They don't know what they're talking about. Fox. Fox has a tie. That's interesting because, again, they tend to actually be liberal with their polls. Rasmussen has it at a tie. You'd probably think that favors Democrats then. Susquehanna has it at a tie. Muhlenberg College has it at a tie. Emerson had it +1, but this you're talking 2 weeks ago again. Time moves so fast. I remember when those Emerson polls came straight out. Felt like it was just yesterday. Marist had it at a tie. Not many polls out of Pennsylvania. And again, I think that's always an indicator that things are moving right because liberal pollsters do not want to poll during that time. And you look at these, I mean, Trafalgar is not liberal. Trafalgar is right-leaning. Fox, you know, as a company, they're right-leaning. As a pollster, they're left-leaning. But you'd probably say that's right. Atlas, right-leaning. Bloomberg, right-leaning. Left-leaning, sorry. But then you've got Rasmussen, right-leaning. And Insider Advantage, right-leaning. A lot of the recent polls are actually from right-leaning pollsters. So that's probably where the average is now. Trump's retaken it, and actually by RCP average, he would win because he takes Pennsylvania, takes North Carolina, he takes Georgia. That's all he needs, and then Arizona's a bonus. But we can get into the rest of the states because there's a lot more to it than just those numbers. But anyway, Trump's up by 0.2. I'd still call it a tilt again. I still think this is another tilt. Probably again 0.5, 0.6. A lot of ties coming out of this state, but I think you lean it or tilt it rather towards Republicans. Now, Harris also leads the national popular vote by 2, which is not enough to win the election most likely. Again, the swing states are what decide it, not the popular vote. But she's probably going to need 2.5 to 3, maybe 3.5 points to win the electoral college with the national vote as whatever value. So now we can go to Georgia, again another Republican state. So Trump's at 254. Again, this is the path we've talked about forever. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia. This is probably Trump's best state, or at least it was for a very long time until Arizona. I mean, Arizona's just gone insane at the moment. Harris has only led it for a very brief period, and actually after the debate, it's only gotten better for Trump. We saw it was Harris's support just tanked here, and then it's kind of recovered. So it's about black women turning out in Georgia. That's what's going to make the difference. Atlas has it at +1. Again, we kind of was really struggling to understand what Atlas are doing. They're a little bit all over the place at the moment, but maybe they are the right ones and everyone else is wrong. CBS has it at +2 for Trump. Fox had it at +3. Again, liberal polling firm from Fox, and they are the outlier in this average. Marist, left-leaning pollster, has Trump up by 1. Bloomberg has it at a tie. I mean, they give like +6 to Harris no matter what. So what does that tell you? Rasmussen is +3. New York Times Siena +4. I mean, that is nearly 2 weeks ago now. Or actually, that's more like a week and a half, but +4. That is a big old margin. So again, you'd probably say Trump's winning Georgia, probably by a lean margin. I'd probably say around 2 points right now. Trump's leading Georgia. He'd win the election with these electoral votes. But there's more to it. There's more to it because we got Arizona, which we don't need to talk about too much. There was this +6. I don't know about that, but maybe that's right. New York Times Siena had it at +5. Again, Bloomberg just adding 6 points to Harris. But overall, I mean, Trump's wiping the board in Arizona. I don't. It's definitely not a likely at this point, but it's certainly not a tilt. It's barely a swing state at this point. Um, and then you got Wisconsin, which again, the polling is so bad in Wisconsin, and you look at the polls in the average, they are so left leaning. It's insane. Quinnipiac, Marist, you've got Bloomberg, you've got New York Times Siena. I mean, you got Atlas, who are kind of just mental on both sides, and then you got Rasmussen, who are right. You've got Emerson, who kind of call it down the middle. Fabrizio, who tend to be right, and Insider Advantage, which also tends to be a little bit right. But again, then these aren't strong right polls like these left pollsters are. And again, she's only up. She's basically carried by this a Bloomberg poll. I mean, she would still be leading, but when you equate the polling bias, because you have to assume it can't go from 7 points off in 2016 and 2020 to them underestimating Harris. I mean, you can't expect that to happen. So you have to assume there will be some bias against Trump in the polls, and that he's going to outperform the polls by, and that's up to you. If you think it's zero point 0.5, if you think it's 2 points, if you think it's 6 like last time, that's up to your interpretation. Personally, look, RCP has it at 0.8. I've, for a little bit of time now, I've had it as a lean for Republicans. I think it's going to blindside everyone, and I'm going to put it in lean for Republican. Now, we go to Michigan. So, Michigan, plus 1.4 for Harris, rather. This is supposed to be her best state. Again, the Muslim vote is that's all gone wrong, but she's still fine at the moment. She kind of peaked after the debate assassination attempt time, and now she's sliding a little bit. But again, there's peaks and troughs. It's whatever. Atlas. This was the most egregious Atlas poll. It had Trump up by 4. Maybe they're right. I'm not trying to discredit the integrity of the best 2020 pollster, but they're kind of mental at the moment. Rasmussen has it tied. Again, you're talking about a right-wing pollster, but Bloomberg only has it at +3. You'd expect more. New York Times Siena has it at +1. And then you've got your Quinnipiacs, your Marists who have it at +5. Sure, these were a long time ago as well. Emerson had it +2 again 2 weeks ago. It's things change really fast, but I'd probably you could call it a tilt, you could call it a lean. I'm gonna call it a tilt, and I know it's now gonna look like I'm number one Republican MAGA fan, but I can assure you, I really don't care who wins. Anyway, we move on to Nevada. I feel like I have to keep prefacing that because people don't seem to get it. Anyway, Insider Advantage. This poll was August, so we really haven't got a lot of polls out of Nevada. Trafalgar, +1 for Harris. Again, I like to think Bloomberg had it +7. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I like to think I was ahead of the curve on Nevada because I had it going blue when it was in that toss-up phase. It was really, and it was kind of along this period here where it was between +0.4 and +0.5 for Harris. I was the one beating the drum, and also late August, and sort of around this time, I was saying I think it's going to go blue because it's gone red once since 2004. So, or since the turn of the century in 2004. So really, I think it's going to go blue because these toss-ups, I think when it's a real toss-up, I'm not talking about, when it's under zero point 0.5, people say it's a toss-up. I'm talking about literally even, like Pennsylvania, I wouldn't call that a toss-up. It's tied. If it was tied, then I'd be like, okay, let's look at previous elections, obviously with the context of the pollsters, and I'd say Nevada would go to Harris. Pennsylvania, I'd say would, you look at the history of it, it usually votes in it usually goes against incumbents, like it did in 2016, it did in 2020, and of course it's a vital swing state, so it's going to be a bellwether really. But it's the biggest swing state, I mean. But overall, look, I think Nevada's going to go blue. I think Michigan's going to go blue. But really, and actually, I think this will be a lean. But you're at risk of losing, all six of the actually important swing states. I mean, Nevada doesn't open up any path for anyone, really, unless you're talking about a Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada sort of thing going on. Again, that would have to be, it would look something like this. And he actually wouldn't even win it. He'd win it without it. There is a way. I think it includes Michigan actually, which again, if you're winning Michigan, you're wiping the board, maybe leaving off Nevada. But I think overall, you're gonna see a big win. I think Trump is really motoring at the moment, and I mean Nevada. You look at Nevada. Biden was up by 5.3 points in 2020. Saying that, Trump was up by zero point 0.4 in 2016. He didn't win the state, but polls also in Nevada tend to lean right. I don't know if that's so much at the presidential level. We obviously see with Biden it wasn't, but overall they tend to lean right. So we'll see about Nevada. That's kind of part of the reasoning why I have it as a lean right now. But I mean, this is really starting to look very bad for Democrats now because you're talking about you'd have to win Pennsylvania. I mean, there's no way you can't win without winning Pennsylvania. It would have to be a Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, North Carolina deal. That's a real big ask. I think Arizona and probably Georgia are starting to just fade away from sight now for Democrats. They don't even need to really get into those states. Just let them go because I don't think you're going to get the turnout in Georgia, the black turnout, to win it. And I think Arizona's just a lost cause again at this point. It's just moving right as we get deeper into this election process. That leaves you with, North Carolina, where you're trying to ride the Mark Robinson scandal. You've got Pennsylvania with I mean, the fracking thing has just been brutal. If they were going to do another debate, I think it would help Trump in Pennsylvania. That's a really presumptive statement, I guess. But he just needs to hammer home the fracking thing and say she hasn't changed her policies. Again, look, I'll reinforce my perspective. I'm a British person. I want the best for the UK. I think the weakest candidate of the two of them is Harris. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think she's the weakest of the two. And therefore, I'd rather she gets in, actually, so that we could rip the US off a little bit. But, again, this is what you come here for. You come here for a British perspective, a objective perspective. I have, again, no horse in the race. I don't really care who wins. But overall, I think it's looking really good for Republicans right now, just going off the data. And I think you may see a second Trump presidency. But anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like, to share, to subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you think. 291 to 247 is my number. Let me know yours in the comments.